morning just said the feds ought to look at the Democrats and that phony dossier. Well, we know FBI Director Robert Mueller is looking into Mike Flynn and his possible ties to Turkey. We know he is looking into the Paul Manafort Ukrainian connection, but what about the Hillary Clinton-Russia connection? Wasn't Russia the focus of his investigation? On the phone now is former FBI Assistant Director James Kallstrom, who's been quite vocal about all this. Jim, let's talk about what we know about the dossier and the Democrats' involvement. We now know that Hillary's campaign hired Fusion GPS to get dirt on Donald Trump. We know that. They spent millions of dollars doing that. Second, Fusion was used by the Russians to put out dirt on Trump and specifically created the Trump dossier. So we know that. And third, we know that Hillary's campaign says now that they had nothing to do with Fusion GPS, even though its founder, Glenn Simpson, has a lot of history with Hillary Clinton and the folks in Little Rock, Arkansas. So what do you make of all this? I mean, is there a cover-up going on here?
Hi, David. Good morning. And let me just say, if you'd pass on a happy Marine Corps birthday to you.
Thank you so much. Semper Fi to you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course it's a cover-up. And, of course, Hillary Clinton lies. She's a pathological liar, David. I mean, she's lied her whole life if you go back and just started, the shenanigans down at the Rose Law Firm and, the short tent she had on the Watergate committee hearing where she got fired for lying. And, it just goes on and on and on. She's a pathological liar.
But Mueller's investigation is supposed to look into Russia. We have clear evidence that there's a connection between the DNC, the Hillary campaign, Fusion GPS, and Russia. Isn't that the sort of thing that Mueller's team is supposed to be looking at?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think the whole thing is disgraceful, quite frankly, David. I mean, without question, yes, a special counsel should be looking into these things. But this whole thing with Mueller, the way that Rosenstein, suddenly on his own decided to appoint a special counsel and then appoints Mueller. And it turns out that, Mueller, I know from personal history, has a conflict of interest about 20 miles wide with Jim Comey. So, I mean, it's in violation of the statute that enables the special counsel. And it says a lot about his lack of credibility and his lack of ethics that he would even accept the post. So who knows what he's doing? I mean, it looks like he's just basically, following the breadcrumbs of this perpetrated fraud that the Democrats, Hillary Clinton and the rest of them have tried to, basically enable the duly elected president of the United States. It's 99% smoke. I mean, it's BS.
But if you're Jim, forgive me, if you're looking for a connection between Russia and meddling in the U.S. election, why not look at what Fusion GPS was doing with the DNC and the Hillary campaign in putting out Russian-made dirt on Donald Trump?
Oh, without question. I mean, it's like, David, it's like a giant in the woods that you kind of just walk by and don't see. I mean, it's pathetic. And not only that, how about John Podesta? How about Podesta's brother? How about all the interest that they've had with Russia over the time? So if you want to look at Russia and the government or people associated with the government, I mean, they're looking in the wrong place. And are they going to indict a few people? Sure. Is it right what they're doing? I don't think so. They're not looking at the huge issues of the day, like the unmasking of hundreds and hundreds of citizens of this country. Benghazi. All the lying that took place. I mean, it's just pathetic.
Now, there's another former FBI director, James Comey, who's in the crosshairs because it seems like he really went out of his way to avoid any kind of indictment of Hillary Clinton. Now, one might say it's because he was afraid of interfering in the political campaign or whatever, but it's clear that he actually changed his language from language that would be an indictable offense to less so when he was looking into the various things she'd done with her emails. What do you make of all that?
Well, that's true. And, David, I've been talking publicly for about a year and a half on Jim Comey, who who basically he went astray from the very beginning of this thing. I mean, when he gets a referral from the intelligence community, passed through the Justice Department that has a flag on it, that basically doesn't allow him to put people before the grand jury. I mean, right then and there, the whole thing is a farce. And I can only say what I would have done if I was the director. I would have stood up and had a press conference and respectively resigned, because anyone that knows anything about investigations knew that investigation was going nowhere. And the notion that Obama was going to let his Justice Department indict Hillary Clinton, it was crazy. But, I mean, this whole thing goes back to the fault of the Democrats, putting up a flawed candidate that pretty much everybody in the world knew was flawed and knew that had this track record of deceit and lying and, getting money for certain things that they've done politically. So, Comey danced with the devil, and the music stopped. And here he was trying to backpedal and trying to perpetuate this fraud on the American people.
Jim, a very quick final question. Do you think, going back to the beginning, do you think that it's possible that Mueller may now be looking into Fusion GPS and whether or not there was a connection there between Russia and the Hillary campaign?
Well, all I can say about that is if he has any credibility and has any feeling about ethics and the rule of law, he certainly would be doing that with a lot of gusto, and I hope that's the case.
James Kallstrom, a great American and a great veteran of our armed forces. Good to see you, Jim. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, David.
Happy Veterans Day.
We do want to bring in Mark Stein, now author and columnist, and we always love having you on the couch. Important to get your perspective as we just have that in there sitting down for the steak dinner in Hanoi, Vietnam. What do you make of the trip so far and what you've heard from the president?
Well, it's pretty spectacular, and I agree with what Pete says, that America doesn't have permanent enemies and permanent grievances, particularly against peoples. But it's pretty amazing from the American end, because Vietnam scarred the psyche of America domestically in a way that few wars do to anybody. And to see it from this perspective, where the governments of both countries are sitting down having a great time, that actually is important, I think, not just for what's happening there, but for the home front too.
But Mark, talk about the importance of the opportunity that exists in Vietnam. No country in that part of the world perhaps has gone through such a transformation. And President Trump there sitting at this state dinner is significant for perhaps what the future holds in terms of trade deals.
Well, I think they're actually quite a pro-American, pro-Western government, and they're actually quite a... I bumped into my old friend Carol Thatcher, Mrs. Thatcher's daughter. I was walking down the street, and I said, "Oh, where have you? I haven't seen you in ages." She said, "I've just come back from Vietnam. I've been in Vietnam for 3 weeks." She goes, "What a marvellous government. They're full of terrific ideas. I wish some of our useless British Conservative Party had some of their ideas." And they are actually quite a pro... That is actually quite a pro-Western, small government, business-oriented regime that you can do business with.
Well, speaking of useless conservative parties in the minds of some, Steve Bannon has been hypercritical of Mitch McConnell, says he doesn't believe he'll be the majority leader this time next year. What do you think the future is of Mitch McConnell and the criticism of Steve Bannon, and is it hinging on tax reform?
The future of Mitch McConnell, Pete, is like that scene in Titanic that always brings you to tears as your comrades were mocking you for. And, no, I love that. I'd love to be like with all the guys. What are we going to watch tonight? We're going to watch The Great Escape. And Pete's, no, every time I see you. And that's actually what I'd love to see the Republican Party do that to Mitch McConnell. The Republican Party is Kate Winslet, and Mitch McConnell's trying to hang on to the door. And like Kate, there comes a time when you have to say, "Sorry, Mitch, we have to let go. My heart will go on," as he sinks beneath the waves.
This is the Fox News alert. There's now news that possibly they didn't have to let go. She didn't have to let go. And that is what the Republican Party and the Conservatives need to do with Mitch McConnell, because under regulatory reform and President Trump, the country's grown 3% GDP. And what even the New York Times is willing to admit is with this tax reform out of the Senate and the House, if they can actually get it together, I doubt it's going to be by Christmas, but if
and
they
we're
can, we're talking about we have Titanic being rolled. There's Kate. But here's the point. 3% more. The New York Times saying 3.7% GDP could grow even more if they can get something done, and conservatives perhaps stand in the way more than anybody.
But, you know, you're talking about legislation, and people say Mitch McConnell's the master parliamentarian. But it's not just that he's failing at the legislation. All the, you know, we're now a year into since Trump's election, and still all the deputy assistant undersecretaries at the Department of whatever have still not been confirmed. So even it's not just that he gets, you know, the bill gets shot down by whichever, you know, emir of Incumbistan senator decides to kill it, but it's like all the well, that's what they are, those senators. I mean, you can't. They're the emirs of Incumbistan, but it's like these guys. It's even the deputy assistant undersecretary. The Democrats are all blocking them, and the master parliamentarian is going along with it, which makes you think he's actually not that sympathetic to the Trump agenda, too.
All right, I do want to get back to this Titanic analogy, because I think there's actually more there when it comes to the Republican Party. So Kate Winslet is saying